Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with season 13, episode 16 of our weekly Q&A thing. You're currently consuming the content however you're consuming it, so it's either a video or a podcast to you, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be anything else. Right. Why would it be anything else?
Right. So this is the season, if this is going to have a theme, the theme for this season is getting more of each week's challenge character, getting more time to play it, getting more involved, getting better feel for the nuances of each character. This week is the challenge character we're expecting this week. Coming up is probably Arkham Knight Harley Quinn. And I've always hated facing her because of the chance that she's going to jump in when we do a tag in, tag out. Mm-hmm. But I've always found it hard to use her effectively. And I think that's because her special one, it doesn't do a lot of damage. And her special 2 does a lot less damage because of out of the choices of her options that cycle through. Mm-hmm. The bomb, which is the one that does damage, is unblockable, which you think is good, but it does half damage because of that. So it does half the damage it should, given what her attack stat is. Mm-hmm. And with very few exceptions, I think the more I play each one of the characters, the more I get a sense of the things that actually make them good. And it's true even with Arkham Knight Harley Quinn. So watch the footage here. I think probably if I use the right footage, there's just after the 8-minute mark and just after the 10-minute mark, there are moments where we're intending to tag her in to save the character, her teammate on the screen, but the opponent gets in before us. And normally that would leave us a little bit vulnerable because when there's that transition, that tagging in, we don't get the full benefit of Master's Death card immediately. I think the power bar that's supposed to show up doesn't show up until something hits us or we hit somebody. And so unless you've already got a bar of power when you're tagging in to do it, you have to wait longer than you'd like. And it's almost like they avoid some of the stun, not stun, but sort of the part where they're not able to attack as a result of Master's Death card. Mm-hmm. But instead of that, her passive was actually useful for us on offense because instead of being vulnerable, Harley Quinn uses her passive. We're locked out. We can't actually tag in Harley Quinn. We're locked out. Harley Quinn uses her passive first, knocks out the opponent before we can tag in, and then we get tag in, clean slate. Arkham Knight Batgirl is an ideal teammate for pretty much every Arkham character. Lots of reasons for her to be great with Harley Quinn, but a big one here is it allows us to make Arkham Knight Harley Quinn a damage dealer instead of just support. And that's because Arkham Knight Batgirl has a special one that if you gear her properly like we have here, does as much damage as many other characters' special 2. Mm-hmm. And we sort of take that for granted because all the Batgirls are good like that. But it changes the complexion of a team where, because Batgirl only needs 1 bar of power, we give her Chanty Totem, Arkham Knight Harley Quinn gets Master's Death card, and all of a sudden she's much more effective doing a little bit of special damage. She can shatter gears because she's got Claw of Horus, and she effectively disables the opponent's specials because of Enchantress Companion Gear. So I'm liking her more. This team actually works really well, but as much as I want Harley Quinn to be a star, and she is a little bit because she's doing damage, the real star is just how good Arkham Knight Batgirl is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you wanted to say something. You've been playing a video game, I think, and you just finished it, right?
I did, yeah. So I talked about it a little bit, I think, last week. It's called 1000X Resist. And having played it all the way through, I think I can very comfortably recommend it now. Mm-hmm. One thing, actually, it's been nominated for a Hugo and a Nebula.
Oh, what's the category?
I think it's like the written category or something. Like it's because it's a
like
video
a media
game, right?
Category?
Yeah. But it's been nominated. Jenny Nicholson also got nominated for that Star Wars hotel video.
Oh,
she got nominated
for
it's like a related work or something.
Yeah. But they do what do you call it? That is it as a fan writer? But not, it wouldn't be.
I don't know. I think it's called like related works or something like that.
So let me just see.
But yeah, 1000X Resist is a nominee for I forget what category, best game or interactive work. And so just having played through it, I think I really enjoyed my time with it. It's got a really dense, layered, interesting story. There's a lot going on, and I think it's a story that doesn't answer every question that you have. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to be willing for that. And it's a story that at any given moment, there is a lot that you don't know. But I will say that at every moment, I think the reason why it works so well is that the emotional beats, the emotional through line of the story, I think pretty much always does work, in my opinion. And so even if you don't know exactly what's happening, you've got some questions about the world, about the way information is being presented to you, stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. Questions about, oh, what's this? There's a mystery to it, right? But the emotional arcs of the characters within that mystery are always relatively comprehensible. Mm. You sort of get it. And so I think it's got a lot to say about the Asian diaspora and sort of inherited ways of being, right? The ways in which you are and are not like the people who raise you. I think it has a lot to say about that. It's got some really interesting sci-fi. It's I think it's a visually very striking game, which I think is impressive given the small team and the relatively small budget. Like, I think there's like the models and the environments aren't super detailed, but they have a really strong, like, there's a strong art direction. There's a great use of color and design to make the world feel interesting and rich and meaningful. And there was a lot of moments where I found myself genuinely, like, very much engaged and sort of emotionally affected by the plot and the characters, which I think is a hard thing to do, right? Like, I think whenever something is a dramatic work, right, it's easy for it to not really reach you. It's easy for something to feel maybe melodramatic or contrived. Yeah. And so I think, like, one of the strongest recommendations I can give for it is that it mostly really does work emotionally, I think. Mm. And there's some real good grounding, and there's I would say that it's a beautiful game in a lot of ways. Just in terms of, like, how tightly and interestingly constructed it is. And so it's, you know, I don't mean to say that I think this is, like, a perfect experience or, like, the best thing I've ever played, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, it's very, very good. And I think knowing not too much about it going in, if you like narrative stuff, right, there's basically no like, fail states in the game. Okay. It's if you want to experience a narrative through the medium of video games as a thing, right? Then I think it's a good choice. And if you like sort of sci-fi storytelling heavy, it's a little bit narrative game, a little bit of adventure game. There's, like, a few sort of little moments that I think it drags a little bit when they're asking you to sort of navigate a space and, like, go and find stuff and, like, talk to people. And they want you to, like, talk to a certain number of people. And so, like, that's the slowest moments in the game, and the sort of the thing that I liked the least. But I think it did something effective with that, which is it gave you a real sense of space. So as you are going around in these areas, you are navigating them and you're getting a sense of space, right? You're learning how to navigate them. They feel more like real areas and not just sort of like an environment for a story to take place in, which I think is cool. It didn't always feel entirely necessary to me, but on the balance, you know, that's sort of the thing where I most was like, as a video game, I'm like, this is not, like, my favorite video game thing, right? It would be cool if, you know, when you're reading a book, you go on to the next page and they're just where they need to be, right? You're not doing any navigation for them. But, like, with a very, very marginal sort of, like, rough around the edges, small team, whatever, if you're willing to make any sort of allowance for it not being sort of the world's most perfect polished thing, I think there's something really, really meaningful and compelling there. So I don't want to make that sound like my criticism is to take away from the quality of experience. I had a really good time with it.
So is it fair to say, because the one part that seemed to sort of jump out at me, the way you were describing it, is that it sounds like it's trying to do something a little bit different, right? It's not like when you talked about some of the commentary on the Asian diaspora. I always want to say diaspora. I don't know what's the right pronunciation.
Yeah, well,
I never. In my
I'm
mind,
not sure either.
I don't know. It's funny sometimes how there's words that I'm familiar with because I've read it so much, and then when I hear it in real life, it sounds so odd to me.
Yeah.
Because I only ever have a conversation with myself using that word.
Mm-hmm.
But because there's different kinds of media that can be enjoyable, right? Sometimes it does something really something interesting and different, and there's a joy in that by itself. And then sometimes they give you exactly what you want, exactly what you're used to, but they do it well enough that there's a joy in that too.
Yeah. I think it's so hard to say because I haven't experienced a ton of stuff like this. I think it's very much like a sci-fi game. Like there is a lot of stuff that feels moderately high concept. There is a lot of like very like I kept kind of thinking I knew what the game was and being at least a little bit wrong.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I mean. Like there's a feeling that part of it is it messes a little bit with your expectations, and it can't do that as well. To me, that's when those are the kind of games or media or whatever that when I tell people I don't want to spoil it for you because that's part of the joy.
Yeah,
it's because they do something different. They do it in a way that you don't necessarily expect.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that I don't play a lot of like visual novels or games in that same genre, so I don't know what the conventions are to mess with, right?
Right. That's
so
fair,
like I've played like What Remains of Edith Finch, which is like this sort of narrative adventure.
I remember
game
that one
that I quite liked. And you were actually almost a little disappointed by it because you were sort of more under the impression, sitting down to play a video game, you kind of thought there was a little bit more of like a fail state or a success state kind of thing.
Yeah. I thought
less that it was just like a thing to experience.
So to me, like the fun narrative game that I played that you introduced me to was Her Story.
Yeah.
Like I was expecting something more like that, where there's something that you put together.
Or like Portal 2.
Sure, where you actually have to take more of an active role. Like in Edith Finch, it felt like it was just there, and whether you were there or not, it didn't matter.
Yeah. And so I think that it's more of like an Edith Finch kind of story than Her Story kind of story where... to be fair, I think there is stuff to piece together and think about and puzzle out, but and I think that's a lot of the interest in the game. But I think you'll be asking questions and then the game will be kind of like answering them or like unraveling stuff to you. And so I think it's actually hard to say because I think in the way that it rewards you thinking about it and engaging critically with it, it is a lot like Her Story. But it doesn't require you to sort of have go through the clips, right? Because one of the things that makes Her Story the way it is that it's non-linear and that you are typing in stuff and following leads. So the information in the game that you experience is very much directed by your understanding of the game and how you're choosing to engage with it, right?
Well, it's much more obviously changed by your involvement.
Yeah. Even though none of it's like actually changed, right?
Right, but it does make a difference how you, like the different pathways. You know what it's like? It's like choose your own adventure, where you'll eventually get to the end. But depending on the choices you make, you get there by different paths, and you will jump around different ways. And sometimes you can overlap, and a lot of times you don't. But it really feels like what you chose, what you did, matters.
Yeah. So in this game, I'll say it's less that the things that you do matter, except for adding sort of additional richness and context. Like there's conversations that you don't need to have, places that you don't need to go. There's sort of optional objectives throughout it that don't change the overall story, right? And they don't change the order that you experience events in, but you can spend more time in the world and learn a little bit more about it. And you know, if it's just for color or for whatever else.
So if we're talking about stuff that we did recently, I'm going to give you a counterexample. So all right, I skip rope every day at lunch during lunch at work, and that's my main time for watching TV.
Yeah.
Because when I'm working out, I can't really watch. It'll distract, like working out with weights, I mean.
Yeah.
I can't really watch because I'd have to pause it too much, or I get distracted too much that my workout ends up being too long.
If it's too good, it actually is worse.
Right. So I need background noise when I'm lifting weights. I want something that will capture my attention when I'm doing aerobic stuff, like skipping rope. because I want to be distracted enough so that when things start to hurt, I can just power through it and make it through my time. So I just watched something that I enjoyed, the exact opposite of it. It is a rom-com. It's called Nobody Wants This. It's on Netflix right now. And it does nothing new. Very much like the typical kind of, what you expect, meet cute, they have difficulties, that kind of stuff. But what I like about it is that what it does really well is that it makes it, the way it lets a story evolve, it makes it feel less contrived than rom-coms normally are. And whether that's actually true or not, I don't know. There's very few moments, and there's lots of moments that are contrived. But the way they get to the points that they're making, there's just a much more natural feel to it. And it might be, whenever I see something like that, people always give credit to the actors. And I'm sure they're very good. I mean, I like Kristen Bell. I don't really know Adam Brody. And Kristen Bell was amazing in Veronica Mars. I mean, I love that show. But I have to think that at least a part of it it's the writing. I mean, again, delivery of the lines matter a lot.
I think it's a little bit of everything, too. I saw one thing where somebody was talking about, I think it was Ben Stiller talking about Severance. And one of the things that he learned early from somebody when he was learning how to direct and stuff is that he was told that he was calling cut way too early. And that oftentimes if you let just people sit in their performances with the line reads, you let them hang out and you get really good, interesting, emotional moments, right? Yeah. And so I think the directing in terms of the space between the lines and how much time people have to develop, right? Where the more you have sort of around the lines, the more you can actually feel like they're talking and not just like they're delivering content, right? That they're getting through it. And then it's editing too.
I think it's true both ways, but getting the moment before you start isn't actually possible, right? Like most of the time when you film stuff, if you're doing it by script, as an example, then you know what you're going to get with some minor variability depending on the performances.
Yeah.
But if you could start, in life, if you could start filming, or most of the time I wish I'd started filming earlier, miss the spot.
Yeah.
And sometimes you cut off too early because something happens. Like it's really just those moments to get exactly when you want it. And you're just more likely to have it the more footage you have in general. So no, I totally get that. But
you're talking about the believability and like the how well.
Yeah, and it's just there's an energy to it that feels. And I like I said, I always see it as the comment that people say is that it's the chemistry between the actors, and maybe it is that, or maybe they're just really good. But there's just like I think it's an interesting sort of contrast where, in my mind, I think the writers probably do a big part of the work that makes something good.
Yeah. But
they get the least amount of credit for it. So who gets the credit? Directors? The actors?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always that joke, right? Where that actor or actress was really naive because they wanted to get a good part and they slept with the writer. Or whatever, like that.
I don't know if I've heard that one before.
The writer is a really low man in totem pole, so trying to get in on anything through the writer is is a mistake.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was fun. It was nothing new, nothing special, nothing really unexpected, but just it's the opposite of what you had, right? It was comfortable, even though I'd never seen it before, and it was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some good media all around. Yeah, there's lots of places and there's lots of ways for something to be good. Right?
Right.
There's like an almost unlimited number of ways for a piece of media to be good. Right? Like interesting, surprising, challenging. It doesn't always even need to be enjoyable necessarily to experience. Some stuff is good in a way that would be worse if it was enjoyable.
My expectation is it needs to be enjoyable. If it's a movie that's good for other reasons, but it's not enjoyable, I'm not that interested.
Well, I'm just talking about media more broadly. Like, for example, like a non-fiction book about like a tragedy, right? You don't necessarily want it to be enjoyable. I think some stuff, actually, depending on the topic, if it is too enjoyable, if it is too much meant to be sort of like an easy thing to consume, and they write it for that, there are some topics that I think would actually be done a disservice, you know?
Yeah. That's
fair.
And
I don't want to talk too specifically about any of them because they're pretty heavy by definition, but
Yeah, I think I can think of a couple examples like that.
Yeah.
There was one story called Flying in Place by Susan Palwick. Super powerful novel, short, It did not make nearly as big a splash as I thought. It's about child abuse.
Yeah.
And powerful. But it's one of those books that I can't bring myself to read again.
Yeah.
Because it was very unsettling. Mm-hmm. There was also...
If it was an enjoyable read, it would have been a worse text,
right,
probably.
But I highly recommend it. If you've never read it, you should. It's Susan Palwick, Flying in Place.
Yeah.
And the other one that I can think of that fits that exactly is Briar Rose. So it's retelling the Sleeping Beauty story in the and retold through the lens of the Holocaust.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Did you read it?
You had me read it, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was pretty brutal, I think.
It was, but it was... I feel like I am a different person for having read it, and I would never take that back, but I don't think I would read it again.
Yeah.
Like, it's really super powerful.
Yeah. When you want to have a complex and nuanced portrayal of something awful and harrowing, the best thing you can do is make that thing a little bit awful and a little bit harrowing, right? And you know, you want to be a little unflinching with that to do it justice, right? If that really is what that topic is, right?
Oh, the other example of that was Flowers for Algernon. I think I remember... See, I've actually recently reread that.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But it's, again, that kind of... There's something about it that is very life-affirming, but also very sad. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess if you... Yeah, no, I think that those illustrate your point really well. Yeah,
it's funny because you came up with more points for it than I think I would have had. But I think it's good we're in agreement at least.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if my idea would come across.
But
fully.
if anybody who hasn't read Briar Rose by Jane Yolen, absolutely recommend that.
Yeah. It's been a while since I don't remember too much of it, but I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, good stuff. There's lots of good stuff and lots of ways for it to be good. Yeah. I think we can agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So our first comment comes from, cause this is a Q&A if you didn't know, 22 minutes in, comes from, Hayes Kasaki or Haze Kasaki.
I would think Haze because, all right, so my friend who's Japanese has told me that, you know, each syllable is separate and it has its equal emphasis. Yeah. And so it's unlikely to be if Kasaki. Kasaki's our clue, maybe that it's a Japanese root. Yeah. For the name. Yeah. So
there we go. They say Blackest at Doomsday would be goated if his passive let his special damage go up to 9 times damage, sort of like Boss Helm and Grundy. And actually, I'm going to take a second to just say that I'm trying to figure out how to scrub the details from this to make it a story that doesn't reveal any personal information about anybody.
I think it's dox yourself.
Yeah, I'm not going to. But I was talking to a younger person recently who had absolutely no accent in their speech, and they were telling me that they weren't that good at English, and I was just surprised, right? Because I just had no indication that they were like a non-native English speaker, right? And they said that they were ESL, and
English as a second language.
English as a second language.
Is that like
standard? I think that's pretty standard. I don't know, but they had moved here pretty young. But what they were telling me is that they...
How young?
I don't know how young exactly.
Because I came to Canada when I was young. I'm English as second language, but I don't speak anything better than English.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's a kind of similar example. But so the thing that they were saying, because they're in like high school now, is that they like spoken English and understanding English they're fine with, right? But formal English and like thinking in English, right? Right. So when you are required to sort of think in or process information in a specific regimented way that is different from sort of like talking with your friends, right? That their English is not as good. But the way that they said it was, "My English is low-key trash, bro," which I thought was really funny because
that's good. It's evocative. It very much captures the idea, I think, but it's almost poetic.
Well, it's evocative, and I think the other thing too is that when I hear somebody say my English is low-key trash, bro, that is somebody who knows the slang, who like everything. To me, that is exactly why I would never have guessed it, because that sounds like somebody who is so immersed in English, right? Yeah, no, like specifically like North American young colloquial English, and there's a sort of is prosody the right word?
Prosody, is that the rhythm? That's the rhythm of it.
Yeah, there's like a rhythm and like intuitive understanding of the language that I think is demonstrated by that. So when they said that, the way that they said it was so initially shocking to me, because I'm like, that is if somebody was saying, like, my English is not very good, and if there was some grammar mistakes or some clear like discomfort with the language, that would feel like, oh yeah, I can see that. But it was almost whimsical how like for how good it made them seem at English, right? How natural it makes English seem to them.
That's what I mean when I say it sounded like poetry.
Yeah.
And so prosody, the definition is, according to dictionary, is the patterns of rhythm and sound used in poetry.
Yeah.
The translator is not obliged to reproduce the prosody of the original.
Yeah. So it's just there's a contrast there to say somebody's saying I'm low-key trash at English. I'm like, but you sound so good at English. Well, you've mastered a type of English.
And that is literally a refutation of that.
Yeah. But also, like, in a more real and nuanced sense, like, I get what they were saying, too.
Yeah, for sure. They're not wrong.
Yeah.
So, all right, so here's the interesting thing, right? That would be a ridiculously amazing passive.
Back to the original, it's goaded if his passive let special damage go up to 9 times damage.
So from two perspectives. One, special damage is way more than basic damage. You're just amplifying whatever benefit you get from a passive like that. You're amplifying it by the degree that you amplify damage when you go from basic to special damage. And then the second thing is that the 9 times damage comes at a cost. You have to have low health. This comes at no cost. Really, except for your time. Once you've put in the time, you don't actually have to take any damage. You don't have to be any weaker. Yeah. So I think not only would he be goated, but it's one of those kind of extreme sort of thought experiments, wishful thinking, that would make it just too unbalanced. Like he would be, Doomsday would be too good if that happened.
Simply too goated.
Goated.
So there we go. Our next comment, probably our last comment for the week, comes from Zooming Ken. They say, "Hi, I have a question. Why do you have Flash as number 1, Hawkgirl as number 2, and Batman as number 3 in the Batman Ninja lineup? Personally, I believe Batman...
Blackest Night.
Blackest Night. DN.
You've got
Blackest
Batman
Night,
Ninja on the head.
We were talking about it right before we started filming. Personally, I believe Batman should be number 1 because the special 2 can take out 2 people, and sometimes, not all the time, even take out characters with Astro Harness, as long as the enemy with Astro Harness is the first person in the enemy lineup. If the first enemy has Astro Harness, I usually hit the enemy once or twice, get them down to 70 to 85% HP, block until they attack, then use special 2 to one-shot them, and one-shot the second enemy too. Then I also one-shot the third enemy with the second special 2. To be fair, though, I only have Blackest Night Batman as Elite 10, while all my other Blackest Night teammates are Elite 0, so my opinion is subjective. I just use the other Blackest Night as support for the passive and as a tank. Maybe Hawkgirl can one-shot 2 people with Special 2 with Astro Harness 2 at Elite 10. Correct me if I'm wrong, I barely have a few Elite 10, so I'm still inexperienced and barely got Tantu Totem. I still don't have all the gear to experiment, nor do I have enough shards. Also, I rank this based off of multiplayer efficiency with the limited resource and time I have. I got it from Mr. Bombast 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So let's make sure we disambiguate the question. So that's a ranking number, not order in the team, because to me, order in team is more obvious. Hawkgirl I want as number 2 in general because I'm using her, if I'm using her as a tank, I want to control when I use Astro Harness. Mm-hmm. And I don't want Hawkgirl's number 3 because 3 is just easier at the edge. I'm less likely to make a mistake touching the wrong part of the screen. Yeah. When I tag in, my first tag in, like I like building a lot of teams with tag-ins. Yeah. And Flash as number 1, depending on whether he's the special specialist or whether he's just a basic damage dealer, because Flash, I love all Flashes. They have fast basics. They are good options when you have tag-in entry hazards so that you don't want to tag somebody in. Arkham Knight, Harley Quinn being an example, as an opponent that you avoid tagging in if you can help it and it doesn't weaken your strategy too much. But Flash, I feel like, is number 1 because there is... Okay, so I've always struggled with the balance between offensive and defensive abilities, right? Like, to me, the offensive part was always more important, and it still is. But at some point, when your damage output gets so high, then you don't want to have your main star, the main damage dealer on the team, be so delicate that there's a risk that you lose them, because in a world where, I mean, our teams aren't even that unbalanced compared to what other people do, but in a world where there's the idea that seems pretty pervasive, is that you have one guy that you call carry that does all the damage, brings a couple, carry the other two along. And the problem always is, to me, that there's a small chance that you lose that person, that you're 1 star. And if you do, then the game is over. I hate feeling like at any point before the game's actually over that it is already over.
Yeah.
So to me, Flash is number 1 because he's got a huge amount of offensive potential, and he's got inherent defensive potential because of his passive that also has offensive potential. So when he can interrupt the opponent's basic, that's defensive. But because they are in that little, they're sort of stuck a little bit. They're sort of frozen.
Yeah.
Then you can get an unblocked combo, or you can get an unblocked special, absolutely free. And even though damage over time doesn't happen that often, the few times that it does, his passive of giving you more power and healing you, I feel like, is great. I'll grant you, Batman is, a lot of it is a bit of a toss-up, right? Batman is not that far off, if he's even that far off. And a lot of times, to me, they're just the ones that you've named are the 3 top Blackest Night characters.
Yeah.
And I can make an argument for any of them being the best. But Batman having the extra hits at the end of a special 1 for Claw of Horrors to really crack open Astro Harness, plus the unblockable chance on attacks, that's pretty good. He can take advantage of Flash's passive the same way Flash can take advantage of Batman's passive. And Hawkgirl herself, I think, I'm not entirely sold on her potential as what we like to have as basic damage dealer. However, her ability to make any Blackest Night character almost twice as good by giving you a second version of them where they get a bunch of their health, and in the case of Flash, 100% of his health, that's where his passive comes in, right? Because his other passive is that if he revives with 100% health instead of, the 30% or 60% or whatever he gets, depending on how you've geared him or composed his team. Then she, even though she's herself not that great, the fact that she's able to almost double the value of anybody else who's Blackest Night, I think that's pretty spectacular. Right? To me, like Hawkgirl Prime.
Oh, for sure.
She is absolutely S tier. She doesn't do a lot herself, but her ability, like you're seeing it in this fight now, her ability to cut down on the cooldown clock for Tegan, it's non-pari. It's incomparable. It changes the complexion of the fight. It makes Tentu Totem so much better. I just, you don't have to be the star to be a really important part of the team.
Yeah, which just speaks to, having different values or valuing things at different weights changes so much what order you put people in. Yeah. But anyways, I think that's a great place to end it off for the week. To finish up, we have some thanks we'd like to give out. We, as always, would love to thank all of our lovely patrons on Patreon. We also have a new patron, which, as much as we've talked about how it continues to be exciting and cool for people to support us, I'm always, surprised and delighted when somebody new decides to sign up, because I'm like, wow, really?
Yeah.
More? Yeah. That's awesome. So we'd like to give a huge thank you to...
That's Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi127, Nora Klimek, and our brand new patron, Miguel, who are all supporting us on the credited level.
Yep. And we'd also like to give a less direct, but still warm thank you to everybody supporting us however you do, which, includes watching to the end of the video if you're listening to this right now.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.